The smoke hit my lungs before I saw the flames. I was running, one shoe gone, bleeding, a bakery apron I'd grabbed off the door hook pressed against a child's face, down a hallway that used to be my mother's bakery. The ceiling was caving in. Orange light ate through the walls like something alive, something hungry, and the heat was so intense my skin felt like it was peeling off my bones. And somewhere in that fire, a little girl was screaming. Not my name, his. Appa Appa, APPA. 3 years old, trapped behind a wall of fire that was growing by the second. And Kang Jihoon, the most dangerous man in Chicago, the man every woman in the city couldn't stop chasing, was on the other side of the front window, trying to rip through the security bars with his bare hands. Blood running down his fingers. His men pulling at him, shouting in Korean. And his face, God, his face, was the face of a man watching his entire reason for breathing burn alive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what he had between his legs, the thing that made every woman in this city lose her mind, before you'll understand why I ran deeper into that fire instead of out of it. My name is Amara Osei, 26, broke in the bone-deep way that doesn't wash off. I ran a bakery on 5th and Langston called Sugar and Grace, my mother's dream, left to me when pancreatic cancer took her 2 years ago. I kept it alive with denial, 4 a.m. wake-ups, and hands so cracked they bled into the flour. My younger brother Kofi, 16, asthmatic, brilliant, was the only thing that mattered more. His inhaler cost more than my weekly revenue, and his dream of college was a promise I'd made my mother on the last night she recognized my face. That was my life, the first time I heard about Kang Jihoon. I didn't see him, I heard about him. Mrs. Delphine, my mother's oldest friend, the woman who lived 3 doors down, the closest thing I had to family besides Kofi, came into the bakery that Tuesday morning with her eyes wide and her voice doing that breathless thing it did when she had gossip. Baby, I just saw the most beautiful man God ever made walking down Langston, suit like he stepped out of a magazine, tattoos everywhere. And the women, Amara, I counted 4 women turn around on the sidewalk to follow him. Follow him. Like magnets, like they couldn't help it. But here's the thing, she leaned across the counter, lowering her voice like the bakery was bugged. It's not his face. It's what he's got between his legs. That's what's got these women losing their minds. I stared at her, Mrs. Delphine. I'm just telling you what I saw. I laughed it off, but something about the way she said it stuck in my head like a song you can't shake. And the next morning, when I noticed 2 women standing across the street from my bakery at 11 a.m., well-dressed, clearly not from this neighborhood, staring at my front door like it was the entrance to a nightclub, I started paying attention. He came in at 11:47. The bell jingled, I looked up, and my brain just stopped functioning. He filled the doorway, tall, broad, black overcoat that moved like smoke, dark hair pushed back from a face so sharp it looked dangerous, not attractive dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. Tattoos crawled up both sides of his neck. Ink covered his hands, every finger, every knuckle, the kind of tattoos that don't come from a parlor. 2 men flanked him, silent, enormous. His eyes scanned my bakery in 2 seconds flat, cold, calculating. He looked at me the way a hawk looks at open ground. I should have been terrified. Then I heard it. A noise, behind him, below him. A small, impatient, impossibly bossy voice muffled by the fabric of his coat. Appa, move, I can't see. He stepped to the side. And there, clinging to his left leg with both arms, her cheek pressed against his knee, her face turned toward my display case with an expression of total awe, was the smallest human being I had ever seen with that much authority in her voice. A little girl, 3 years old maybe, round cheeks, enormous dark eyes, a pink tutu worn over jeans, paired with light-up sneakers that blinked every time she shifted her weight. She was wedged between his legs like that was her designated spot in the universe, like she'd been born there and saw no reason to relocate. And this man, this terrifying, ink-covered weapon of a man, looked down at her. Everything changed. The coldness in his eyes dissolved like frost in sunlight. His jaw unclenched. He crouched, right there on my cracked tile floor, his $1,000 coat pooling around him until he was at her eye level. Soo-min-ah, his voice was different, soft, patient, the voice of a man who would rearrange the cosmos if this child asked him to. What do you want? She pointed one tiny finger at my cupcakes. Pink. Use your words. Pink cupcake, please, right now. I boxed it up with shaking hands. She ate it right there on the floor, cross-legged between his legs, frosting from her forehead to her chin. He pulled out an actual silk handkerchief and cleaned her face, and the gentleness of that gesture, those massive, scarred, tattooed hands dabbing frosting off a 3-year-old's cheek, hit me somewhere I didn't have defenses for. That's what the women were chasing. Not the suit, not the jawline, not the money or the danger or the power. It was this. The deadliest man in the room, made completely, devastatingly soft by a toddler in a tutu sitting between his legs. He left $100 bill on my counter and walked out before I could make change. Now if you're still here, you already know this story is about to get crazy. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for what happens next. He came back every day. His security hated it. I overheard them arguing once outside my window, something about predictable patterns and exposure risk. One of them used the word indefensible. But Jihoon overruled them every morning because Soo-min threw a tantrum if they drove a different route. His love for that child overrode every survival instinct he had, and his men knew it. It was his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness. Always the same, the bodyguards, the overcoat, the cold mask that shattered the instant Soo-min grabbed his finger. She always sat on his shoe while he ordered physically on his shoe, her tiny body wedged between his legs. He never told her to move. He just stood there, letting a 3-year-old use him as furniture. By Thursday, I'd cataloged the micro moments no one else was close enough to see. The way his hand rested on the back of her head when she walked. The way he'd stop mid-sentence with his bodyguard to crouch down because Soo-min wanted to show him a ladybug. The way he listened to her, actually listened, when she told him a story about a cloud that looked like a fish. On Friday, our hands touched. I was passing him his coffee. Our fingers overlapped on the cup, just for a second, and neither of us moved. His eyes met mine over the rim, and for one suspended moment, the entire bakery went quiet. Then Soo-min announced she needed to pee right now immediately, and the moment dissolved. But I felt it for the rest of the day, like a brand. On day 8, Soo-min marched behind my counter without permission, grabbed my apron, and informed me she was helping now. Before I could respond, she'd given me a nickname. Mara, said it with total ownership, like she'd already filed the paperwork. For 30 minutes, she sat on my prep counter frosting sugar cookies into abstract disasters, while Jihoon sat at the corner table, drinking coffee, watching us. Soo-min chattered the entire time, half English, half Korean, all volume. She told me about her pet fish. He's blue. His name is Blue, I named him. And the fact that her appa once tried to make her pancakes and the kitchen got scary. Then, mid-frosting, she said something that stopped my heart. Mara, your hands are like my iyama's. I froze, looked at Jihoon. His coffee cup had stopped halfway to his mouth. How so, baby? I asked gently. They're always busy, always making things. She pressed her sticky palm against mine. Iyama made things too, before she went to the sky. Jihoon set his cup down, walked to the window, stood with his back to us for a long time. His hands were shaking. Later, when Soo-min was dozing on the counter with frosting in her hair, he came to the register and stood there a moment too long. Her name was Yuna, he said quietly, looking at his daughter, not at me. She died when Soo-min was 7 months old. Soo-min doesn't remember her, but she's never compared someone's hands to Yuna's before. I placed my hand on the counter, palm up. He looked at it. Then his fingers, slowly, like a man reaching for something he expected to burn him, settled over mine. We stayed like that until Soo-min woke up and demanded more frosting. Mrs. Delphine noticed. Of course she did. She'd stopped by to drop off her famous jollof rice, the same recipe she used to make with my mother, and stayed an extra 40 minutes watching Jihoon with narrowed eyes. Before she left, she pulled the tin box from my mother's top shelf. Inside was a small envelope. "Your mama gave me this the week before she passed. Told me to give it to you when you needed it most." Inside was $300 and a note in my mother's handwriting. "Amara, you are stronger than you know. The bakery is just walls. You are the grace." I broke. Mrs. Delphine held me the way my mother used to, one hand on the back of my head, rocking gently, whispering, "I know, baby, I know." "That man is trouble," she said as she was leaving. "He's just a customer." "Customers don't look at you the way that man looks at you." She squeezed my hand. "I already lost your mama. I can't lose you too." I hugged her, trusted her the way I'd trusted her my entire life. That was my first mistake. They came on Monday night. 3 men, dark clothing, dead eyes. The one with the scar down his face did the talking. He was polite. He told me they needed me to let them in the back door next time Soo-min was behind my counter. Simple, easy, no one gets hurt. When I said no, he pulled out a photo of Kofi, walking home from school, backpack on, completely unaware. "Your brother attends Lincoln Academy," the scarred man recited. "Gets out at 3:15, takes the 47 bus to Ashland, stops for orange juice every Tuesday and Thursday." He grabbed my wrist, twisted. Pain shot up my arm and I bit through my own lip to keep from screaming. "The girl," he said, "next time she's behind that counter, you open the back door, or the next photo we take of your brother won't be from across the street." The front door exploded inward. Jihoon had installed cameras outside my bakery on day 3. Anywhere Soo-min spent time got surveillance. His team saw 3 men enter a closed bakery. He was 4 blocks away. I don't mean he opened the door. I mean the glass vaporized and the frame splintered and Kang Jihoon came through the wreckage like something biblical. No overcoat. Both arms fully visible, covered in tattoos from shoulder to fingertip. Gun in his right hand. And his eyes, I'd seen them cold before, but this was different. This was the temperature at which things stop being frozen and start being dead. 30 seconds. Less. 3 men went down. The scarred man's jaw broke with a sound I still hear in my nightmares. Jihoon stood over him, knuckles split, blood dripping onto my floor. "You came to her shop," he said. Not a voice, a verdict. "Director Beek's orders," the scarred man choked out. It was all Director Beek. Something crossed Jihoon's face that looked like a wound reopening. He turned to me, looked at my bruising wrist. "They came here because of me," he said. "Because Soo-min loves you, and now you're a target." "How did they know?" I asked. "About Kofi's schedule, about the bakery. Someone had to tell them which days Soo-min comes in when she goes behind the counter." Jihoon's eyes darkened. "We'll find out." He took me and Kofi to a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. Armed guards, 3 floors. Wi-Fi that Kofi immediately asked for the password to. At 2 a.m., a tiny figure appeared in my doorway. Soo-min, dragging a stuffed rabbit by its ear. "Mara, I had a bad dream." "I'm here, baby." She crawled into my lap, pressed her face against my chest. The weight of her, so small, so warm, so completely trusting, made something inside me rearrange. Like my organs were shifting to make room for this child. "Appa fights the monsters," she whispered. "But who fights them when Appa is tired?" "I do." "Promise." "Promise." She fell asleep in my arms. Her fist curled around a handful of my shirt and wouldn't let go, even in sleep. Around 3 a.m., the door opened. Jihoon stood in the frame, phone still in his hand, shadows under his eyes. He looked at Soo-min asleep against my chest, looked at my hand resting on the back of her head, protective, unconscious. The same gesture I'd watched him make 100 times. He crossed the room, sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, smell the coffee and something darker, gunmetal, tension, sleeplessness. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my cheek. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being the person she goes to when I'm not enough." "You're always enough." "No," His voice cracked on the word, just barely, just enough. I'm really not. We sat there in the dark, his daughter between us, his hand resting against my face. And I understood, with the kind of clarity that only comes at 3 a.m., that I was in love with this man, and that it was the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. 2 days later, Jihoon's head of security came in with a tablet. He showed something to Jihoon in Korean. I watched Jihoon's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally a kind of fury that was so quiet it terrified me more than shouting ever could. He turned the tablet toward me. Surveillance footage. Mrs. Delphine, standing in a parking lot talking to the scarred man, handing him something, a piece of paper. The timestamp was 3 days before they came to my shop. My lungs stopped working. She gave them your schedule, Jihoon said carefully, watching my face. Your brother's route home, the days Sumin visited. No, the word was automatic, reflex. She wouldn't. She was my mother's best friend. She watched me grow up. She held me at the funeral. She owes money. His voice was gentle in a way I hadn't heard before. Gambling debts. She's been into Beek's people for almost $80,000. They offered to wipe the debt in exchange for information about my visits. The room tilted. Mrs. Delphine, who brought casseroles, who looked me in the eye and said, I can't lose you too, while selling the information that would put me in a body bag. I didn't cry. I went somewhere past crying. Somewhere hollow and white-hot that leaves nothing but steel. I want to talk to her, I said. No. I wasn't asking. Jihoon studied me for a long moment. Whatever he saw in my face made him nod once. They brought her to the penthouse. She looked small, old, terrified. When she saw me, her face crumpled. Baby, I'm sorry, they said they wouldn't hurt you. They threatened to kill Kofi. My voice was flat. They described his walk home from school, step by step, and you gave them that information. I owed money, Amara. Bad money. They said if I just told them when the Korean man visited. His daughter. They wanted his 3-year-old daughter. Mrs. Delphine's mouth opened, closed. She hadn't known, or she'd told herself she hadn't known. My mother trusted you, I said. Your mother would understand. Don't, one word, quiet as a blade. Don't you ever tell me what my mother would understand. She was escorted out. I stood by the window and watched the city lights blur because I was shaking too hard to see straight. Jihoon appeared beside me. He didn't touch me, didn't speak, just stood there, solid and present until I reached for his hand. His fingers closed around mine, and his thumb traced a slow circle on my wrist, right where the scarred man's bruise was healing. So gently it made my chest crack open. I will end this, he said, tonight. I'm coming. Amara. She was my family. They used my family to get to yours. I'm coming. We were in the car 20 minutes later, heading to the waterfront where Jihoon's men had tracked Beek's operation. The route took us down Langston. The bakery was already burning when we got there. I smelled it 3 blocks away. That chemical, acrid stench that means something is very wrong. I was out of the car before the driver fully stopped. Sugar and Grace. My mother's name still on the sign. Flames pouring from every window like the building was bleeding fire. But it wasn't the fire that stopped my heart. It was the pink light-up sneaker. One shoe, blinking on the sidewalk outside the back door, Sumin's shoe. My brain short-circuited. Sumin was supposed to be at the penthouse, safe, but the shoe was here and... I heard her. Faint, muffled by smoke and crackling wood. APPA, APPA. Coming from inside. Jihoon heard it at the same instant. The sound that came out of him wasn't human. It was the sound of a man whose soul was being ripped out through his chest. He lunged for the front door, but his bodyguards grabbed him, 2 of them, massive men, and he fought them like an animal. The structure's compromised, one shouted. Sir, the ceiling. I didn't wait. I went through the back. The kitchen door was unlocked. Beek's men had used it. My hand caught the apron on the hook by the door, instinct from 10,000 mornings, and I grabbed it without thinking. The heat hit me like a wall. I dropped low. My mother's voice in my head, "Fire goes up, baby. Air stays down." I crawled past the prep counter where Sumin had frosted cookies, past the oven. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see my own hands. S.O. Omen. A cough, tiny, terrified, coming from the supply closet. She'd hidden, smart girl. The closet was concrete, the one part of the bakery my mother had overbuilt because she stored expensive ingredients there. Sumin was curled in the corner, one shoe off, her face streaked with soot and tears, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I grabbed her. She locked her arms around my neck so tight I couldn't breathe, or maybe that was the smoke. I pressed the apron over her nose and mouth. The ceiling groaned above us. A beam dropped 3 feet to my left, showering sparks. I ran. Through the kitchen, through the flames. One shoe caught on debris and ripped off. I kept running on bare skin over broken glass. A nail. I didn't know and didn't care. The fire licked at my arms, my legs, my hair. I felt skin blister on my left forearm. The pain was white-hot and instant but distant, like it was happening to someone else. Because the only thing that was real was the 30 pounds of terrified child pressed against my chest and the sound of her coughing against my apron. A second beam fell, this one behind us, close enough that the impact threw sparks onto my back and I felt embers burn through my shirt. Sumin screamed. "Close your eyes, baby," I gasped. "Don't open them until I say." She buried her face deeper into my neck. Her arms tightened until I couldn't breathe, or maybe that was the smoke, or the fear, or both. The back door was 10 feet away. 8, 5. The handle was hot enough to sear my palm. I grabbed it anyway. We burst through the back door and I collapsed on the asphalt. Jihoon was there in half a second, ripping Sumin from my arms, pressing her against his chest, his whole body shaking. He was saying something in Korean, a prayer, maybe, or a curse, or both. And Sumin was crying "Appa, Appa, Appa" into his neck while his men swarmed around us. He looked at me over his daughter's head. His eyes were destroyed, shattered, every wall he'd ever built reduced to rubble. Amara. My name in his mouth sounded like a hymn, like the only word left in a language that had lost everything else. "I promised her," I said. My voice was raw from smoke. My arms were burned, I was shaking. "I promised her I'd fight the monsters." He reached for me with his free hand, pulled me against him and Sumin both, held us like we were the only solid things in a world that was turning to ash. And I felt his lips press against my forehead, hard, desperate, and stay there. Behind us, my mother's bakery burned to the ground, and I let it, because some things matter more than buildings, more than dreams, more than 17 years of memory. Some things matter more than anything. Jihoon's men found the truth within the hour. It was Mrs. Delphine, again, still. She'd called the penthouse nanny directly. The nanny knew her, trusted her, because Mrs. Delphine had visited during our stay. She told the nanny Sumin's stuffed rabbit was at the bakery, and the child wouldn't stop crying for it. The timing was surgical. She called right as Jihoon's security was mobilizing for the warehouse. Most of the team was loaded into vehicles downstairs. The nanny slipped out through the parking garage with Sumin without anyone noticing. Beek's men were already inside. The nanny was knocked unconscious in the alley, and Sumin was left in a burning building. Not as bait, as a message. Beek wasn't trying to lure Jihoon into a trap. He was trying to destroy the only thing Jihoon loved. Burn the child, break the father, take the empire from a man too shattered to fight back. It was the cruelest calculation a human being could make, and it almost worked. Mrs. Delphine, who held me when I cried over my mother's letter, who made the phone call that almost killed a 3-year-old girl. They hadn't counted on me going in first. Jihoon's medic bandaged my arms in the back of an SUV, while Sumin was rushed to a private clinic with 2 guards. 2nd-degree burns, painful but not life-threatening. The medic told me to go to a hospital. I told him to hand me my phone. Because they also hadn't counted on my phone. It had been in my apron pocket the night those 3 men came to the bakery. I use it for timers, orders, alarms, it's always there. I've been recording a voice memo to track my sourdough timing and never hit stop. When the scarred man said Director Beek's orders and described my brother's route home, my phone caught every word. I didn't realize what I had until the next morning. Jihoon made copies. Sent them to 3 locations, outside the syndicate's reach. The warehouse on the industrial waterfront. Director Beek, 70s, silver hair. He sat at a table with 4 men and looked at Jihoon with grandfatherly warmth. "You brought your baker again. And she brought something for you." Jihoon's voice was ice. I stepped forward, set my phone on the table, hit play. The scarred man's voice filled the warehouse, crystal clear. Director Beek's orders. The plan, the bakery, my brother's schedule, all caught on a voice memo I'd forgotten to stop. Jihoon set a dossier beside the phone. His intelligence team had spent 2 days matching every voice on that recording to known operatives. 2 of the men identified were sitting at Beek's table right now. Their photographs stared up at them from the pages. The 2 men went pale. "This recording and that dossier are already with a federal prosecutor, a journalist at the Tribune, and a third party you will never find," I said. "Right now they're sealed. But if anything happens to me, to Jihoon, to Soo-min, to my brother, they unseal. And every name in that file," I looked directly at the 2 identified men, "gets delivered to the FBI's organized crime unit." The 2 named men shifted in their seats. Loyalty to Beek versus 25 to life in a federal prison. Not a hard equation. Beek stared at me. The grandfatherly warmth evaporated. "You're a baker." "I'm a baker who pulled your goddaughter out of a burning building while you were the one who put her in it. And I'm a baker with a phone, a good memory, and nothing left to lose." I didn't blink. "When Soo-min is old enough to understand what happened tonight, and she will be, who do you think she'll remember? The godfather who tried to burn her alive, or the woman who carried her through the fire?" Silence. The 2 named men stood up, holstered their weapons, walked to Jihoon's side of the room. The remaining 2 did the math and followed. Self-preservation beats loyalty every time when the alternative is a federal prison cell. Director Beek sat alone at that table, abandoned not by conscience, by math. The same math he'd always used, turned against him by a baker with a voice memo she forgot to turn off. He walked out alive. Jihoon let him go, not out of mercy, out of something his daughter taught him, that some victories don't require blood. They just require the truth, spoken loudly enough at the right time. 6 weeks later. The new bakery has the same sign, sugar and grace, but better ovens and a second counter built at exactly the height of a 3-year-old who likes to help. When I told Jihoon I'd pay him back for the rebuild, he said, "You carried my daughter through fire. We will never be even." Kofi got into Northwestern, full ride. Jihoon pretended he had nothing to do with it. I let him pretend. Soo-min still comes every day, still demands pink cupcakes, still destroys them with joyful violence. But now she also calls me Mara-iyama, Mara Mommy, when she thinks no one is listening. I hear it every time. I pretend I don't. But every time, something in my chest gets wider and warmer and more terrifying. Yesterday, Jihoon came in before opening. Just him, no bodyguards. He stood in my kitchen doorway, watching me knead dough, and said nothing for a long time. "I've never been in a room," he finally said, "where I felt safe, not once, not since I was a child." I stopped kneading, looked at him. "This room," he said, "with you, with the flour everywhere and the oven making that sound and Soo-min's drawings on the wall." He paused, swallowed. "This is the only room." I crossed the kitchen, took his scarred, tattooed, violent hands in my flour-covered ones, and I kissed him, slow, deliberate, tasting coffee and cinnamon and something that felt like the future. He kissed me back like a man who'd been holding his breath for years and just remembered he was allowed to exhale. The women still stare. Every morning, I watch through the bakery window as Kang Jihoon walks down 5th Street with a 3-year-old on his hip who is loudly narrating a story about a worm she found. Women stop on the sidewalk. Women walk into parking meters. A jogger has circled the block 4 times. They stare because the most dangerous man in the city goes completely, devastatingly soft for a tiny girl in a tutu. Because what he has between his legs, every single time he stops walking, is a little girl clinging to his ankles, giggling, refusing to let go. And he never makes her. He never once makes her let go. Last week, a woman stopped me outside. "Is he single?" she asked, breathless. I looked through the window. Jihoon was kneeling on my floor, another suit ruined, letting Sumin put a crooked crown of frosting flowers on his head. His bodyguards pretending not to see. The most feared man on the eastern seaboard sitting at a tiny table having a tea party because his daughter asked. "No," I said, "he's not." Lucky woman. I watched him through the glass, watched him let a 3-year-old smear pink frosting across his cheek, watched his eyes find mine through the window. Watched him not smile, because he never smiles, but watched his eyes do it for him. That warm, quiet, devastating thing that was only for me. "Yeah," I whispered. "Lucky doesn't even begin to cover it."